They going north. Yep, see up in Detroit on South. I'm trying to-
We're good. We will call to order the July 12th, 2023 Board of Trustees special called board meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
Moved by Mr. Calhoun. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Roberson. Those of you board members on Zoom, are you going to voice vote? Or are you on board docs?
I will voice vote.
This is Keith. I'll voice vote.
This is Ed. I voted on board docs.
Okay, for the agenda, Dr. Temple,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski,
Aye.
thank you.
Nothing is popping up for me, so I'll say aye. I think I'm. That's what it is.
And the motion passes. It is my understanding we have no in-person public comments this afternoon. Is that correct? Public comments online. There were 4 posted, and each of those were asking us to consider the teacher bonus and pay raise. We are on to item 3A, the public hearing on the fiscal year 24 budget, and I will turn it over to Ms. Carlin.
Okay, thank you so much. So today is our public hearing for the second reading of the FY24 budget. We did not receive any questions on the second reading from the public in our CFO email address. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the following priorities are included in the first and the second reading that's being presented today. The increase in teacher salaries, principal requests from the the school data reviews that were held back in the spring, and then the alignment of the student data clerk's current job duties and the increase in contract days. These are the district financial strategies that we consistently use during budget development. The first one is we maximize state and local tax revenues. We prioritize expenditure needs such as state mandated increases, contractual agreements, contractual obligations, and school and classroom support. We balance the budget and we maintain fund balance at or above our board policy of 16.67%. And we try our best to minimize tax increases to the extent possible. And last but not least, we continuously and will continue to analyze the economic picture with ESSER 3 funds due to sunset in September 2024. Our primary budget assumptions that are included in the first and the second reading. There was a 3% increase on assessed property values. There was an increase of 8.3 mils on the operating millage and a decrease of 2 mils on the debt millage. The proposed millage rates for operating millage is 138.3 and for debt millage is 26. We use projected FY23 year-end expenditures as the baseline to start building the FY24 budget. And we reduced FY23 spending and use these savings to help fund the FY24 budget. This is a snapshot of the public hearing ad that was placed in the Post and Courier on Sunday, June 25th. And it shows our budget comparisons from FY23 to FY24, as well as the projected millage increase for operating and millage debt. Next slide. So the first column of numbers is actually the first reading that was approved with an 8.3 mil increase and was adopted by the board on June 20th. The second column is what we are referring to as our second reading, which is very, very similar to the first reading, except for a few minor changes. And it also includes a step plus a teacher increase of $5,000 on every cell on the teacher salary schedule. Going through the expenditure requests, the required increases are the same that have been presented all along. Nothing has changed with the state mandated increases. In the next section, the school data reviews. As you know, these were held by the principals back in the spring, and none of these items have changed at all. We're still at 6.8 million. And then on the learning services expansions, nothing has changed, as well as the projected enrollment changes. Under other considerations, we did have a slight change from first reading to second reading. And it was staff support for a transient enrollment increase at some of our schools, our high schools. And then we had some superintendent transition related increases as well. The strategies to balance at the bottom have not changed. Those are still at 28.6 million. I'm sorry, it did change slightly by $206,000. And those changes are reflected on the variance column. And then moving on to the next slide where we talk about our fund balance projection. If you look through halfway down the line, you'll read the line item projected fund balance as of June 30th, 23. We are still projecting to end the year with a fund balance of $166.6 million. That's going to fluctuate a little bit as we start paying, additional invoices. The use of fund balance for legal liabilities has remained the same, as well as the use of fund balance for FY24 budget with the FY23 spending freeze, and then the additional revenue and savings from the FY23 budget. And so at this point, in this particular scenario, we are recommending a use of fund balance for FY24 budget around $6 million. And so you'll notice there's two highlighted numbers. One of the main reasons for this slide is to show that our projected fund balance as of June 30th, 2024 is estimated to be 145.2, which basically we are below the required fund balance of our policy, which is we're supposed to remain above, I said below, we're supposed to remain above 143.6. And in both scenarios, we successfully did that with a balanced budget. Next slide. When we talked about the operational contractual obligations and other must-dos, this is a breakdown of those costs. Transportation, the biggest increase is the contractual increase, as well as the purchase of additional buses. And then you'll notice the next section under security, the largest piece of that is the new school crossing guard staffing. And then the next section is nursing services. You'll notice the biggest piece in that is the school nurses. Those are not new positions. Those are positions that are being transferred to GOF from ESSER funding. And then under the maintenance section, the largest increase is due to the custodial and grounds contract. And so the total operational contractual obligations and other must-dos is 10.6 million, which is reflected on both budget scenarios. And then going to learning services, same thing. These are the list of expansions that are on the line item in both budget scenarios, which is offering more services in communications, multilingual services, additional school support, child development, and translation services. And that total is $2.1 million. So this is a summary of our general fund revenues and expenditures. And this is actually taken from our budget book. And what I want to do is just run through the increases in revenues and explain where those are coming from. For local revenues, we are seeing an increase of 41.3 million when you look at the FY23 adopted budget versus the proposed second reading that we're presenting tonight. And that $41.3 million is mostly coming from local tax revenues. The next line item is state. We're seeing a $22.1 million increase, and this is mostly due to state aid, the state aid to classroom funding formula. And then the next section is federal. We're not seeing any change in that particular line item. And then for transfers, you'll notice that there is a reduction of $1.9 million. And this is due to there are a few EIA funds that have rolled up into state revenues. So they basically moved from the transfer line item up to the state revenue line item. But we wanted to be transparent and show that. So we're showing an overall revenue increase of $61.6 million. And on the expenditures, we're noting a $57.3 million increase. And this is also you'll see this in our budget book as well. And this is mostly due to the state mandated increase, teacher salary increase, and then contractual obligations. And in this particular budget, we are also showing a use of fund balance to balance this budget. For FY23, we budgeted $18.8 million. And for this second reading, we're projecting to use a budgeted amount of $14.4 million. And then the next few slides, we've gone over these several times, but basically it shows the impact to taxpayer if we do the 8.3 mil increase with the 2 mil decrease on the debt side. And we have a slide for owner occupied, non-owner occupied, commercial real property, automobile, and personal property. And so our next recommended steps is, of course, to finalize our public hearing for this evening. And then tomorrow we have a special called Audit and Finance Committee meeting to talk about the second reading. And then on July 17th, if all goes well, we hope to have the second reading of the FY24 budget along with a board adoption. And that concludes our public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carlin, especially you and your team. And Mr. Grabowski, we certainly thank Audit and Finance as well. There does not seem to be any public question. Are there any board comments or questions?
Yes, I have to find it within here. Give me a sec.
Thank you, Ms. Carlin. Were you saying you had a question, Mr. Calhoun?
Just a clarification. And I want
Okay.
to find exactly what page it's on. There was a mention with a asterisk that the 8.3 was the 8.3 millage increase was the recommended by the Audit and Finance. I just want to make it clear that was what was recommended by the Audit and Finance Committee. They recommended a higher millage increase, but I did see it within the book when I was looking at it a couple yesterday. So as soon as I find the page that was on, I'll make that clear. But you can go ahead, Ms. Robertson.
When you say the page, do you mean in the budget book, the actual
Yeah.
second reading? Okay.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, there have been instances where the public hearing presentation changes between now and the actual second, the final second reading when the board adopts.
Right.
So
Right.
if something changes, we will definitely, make that transparently known.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, and we actually got that changed within the book that the 8.3 was not recommended by the Audit and Finance. We recommended a higher millage increase. But other than that, I had two more questions, but I didn't bring my other computer with me, and I didn't think about that before all my notes were.
If you want to email me, we'll get those questions answered.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from board members watching?
I have a comment. Yeah, I'm glad Mr. Calhoun mentioned that the Audit and Finance Group did recommend a higher millage increase. I attended the last Audit and Finance Committee meeting, and I brought to the attention of everyone there that I have concerns that our COLA increase for our non-classified employees is not 100% at market value. And we have determined that the COLA increase would need to be 5.5% in order for us to properly fund our employees in that classification. So I want to advocate again for those increases for our non-classified people, because in my research, I found that in the 2014 study, there were recommendations, and we as a district have never funded those recommendations at 100%. And I think that just as our teachers have brought to us the attention that the increase in salaries are needed for them, those same our non-classified employees are facing the same kinds of conditions in their own situations. And I think we need to be sensitive to that. So I'm looking forward to the fact that tomorrow's meeting, we will see some budget figures on that. And I want to advocate for our non-classified employees. Thank you.
Certainly. Any other trustee comments? Ms. Carlin, Mr. Brickman,
Can I go again?
Dr. Gallion?
Oh,
Did you find
yeah.
what you wanted?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have another thing I found. With the ESSER stabilization at 22 million, how did we come up with that number again?
That was under the leadership of our prior CFO, and the person that would be able to help me answer that, Lisa Sizzler, is on vacation, but I will make a note of that and I will follow up. I know a majority of it was position-based. We wanted to make sure that positions we had in ESSER 2 and possibly ESSER 3, that if these programs were working efficiently and effectively and were being led by these individuals, that we wanted to be able to keep that.
Okay, so most of that 22 million is position-based.
Position and program-based.
Okay, so if we need to, because my biggest concern is the use of fund balance. So if it's anything, the easy, I'm not going to say the easiest, because there's nothing easy about anything that you all do. One way we could trying to look at that use of fund balance is going to that ESSER stabilization line. So we can try to bring that use of fund balance down a little bit. So that's why I wanted to see what exactly was coming on that ESSER stabilization line. You see what I'm saying? So if we can move, so say if we got it at that 22 million, if we can see 2 million came about, then we can bring it down. Say if we need to bring it down to like 20 million or something like that, and then pull 2 million out of that and put that towards that use of fund balance. And I'm very scared about us being only 1 million or something away from our line, because if everything keeps going up and we did not raise the millage to the point that we needed it to be, if everything keep going up, then we're going to be right at that line. And
Yes,
say
sir.
if something hits our budget, another lawsuit or anything like that, we're going to be under. So that I'm really thinking about that use of fund balance right now.
One of the things that we're going to be presenting to Audit and Finance Committee tomorrow is a historical review of what we've budgeted to use in fund balance and what we've actually used.
Mhm.
And when we realize going back 5 years, how well we've not had to use fund balance, we wanted to share that with y'all, because we knew it happened a couple of years, but when we actually realized it happened over the last 5 years, it just goes to show that we really do a good job, of protecting our fund balance. But we can talk about that more tomorrow,
Right.
if that's okay.
Yeah, we just plan it out for the worst case scenario at this point.
Thank you for being that thorough. Anything else?
But can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ms. Carlin, and I'm still, I've asked for this many, many times, and I still don't see it in the budget, which really distresses me, is that we still do not take into account in this budget the potential problems we are going to have with ESSER ending. And I note that especially on the special revenue funds, we've just increased the amount of purchase services astronomically. And until we get an opportunity to take this budget apart department by department, I see the potential for I'm just serious problems with ESSER rolling off. I really have a hard time increasing any amount of money until we have an organizational chart and we can actually figure out exactly who's actually making all these salaries and why there's such large increases, especially in the purchase services. I mean, in every department. I mean, I'm looking one here on instructional staff services. We went from 600,000 to 4 million. And, this is the special revenue fund. So I have no way of understanding what is ESSER and what is not ESSER. And I thought I'd made that clear over and over and over again, that we need to have that breakdown. Otherwise, this budget makes absolutely no sense
So
as a potential risk.
we actually did break that down on the consolidated budget statement. If you would look on page 15, we separated ESSER from special revenues and put it in its own column so that the board could see the amount of revenues coming in and how those expenditures are being budgeted for FY24.
82 million.
I understand that, but it's like the dashboard. I've talked to fellow, board members. We've tried to use it. It just doesn't go deep enough. And so to make a decision as to, like Mr. Calhoun was saying, what is being held over in these special funds, it's really hard in looking at this budget without doing a deep dive into each department to figure out exactly what we're doing. I mean, I see that we're paying coaches, $94,000 and, math coaches. And, we really have never gotten into looking at that. We've got these assistant principals coming in at 129,000, and we're talking about putting one out, in schools where we have less than 200 students. I mean, this is why this organizational chart and getting this organizational chart that ties into the budget and makes sense is so critical. But it's the same thing with ESSER. If you're going to do a decent budget, you need to show, it's one thing to show these big numbers with the big numbers with these classifications, but it still doesn't go to show how much we're paying out to vendors for all these services. That it just seems astronomical in this budget, and they are not going to be here next year. And then at the same time, we're spending money on potential programs that we shouldn't be spending money on. I mean, I'm just very, very concerned once again with the way this is being represented. Maybe the public doesn't care, but I sure hear it from a lot of other people, having just driven back from Columbia in wonderful traffic. I just think it just needs to, I don't know how we're going to do this. I know, Mr. Calhoun and I have talked about starting it definitely, as soon as possible in September, but this is just not what I call a transparent budget, in the sense that I can't figure out where all this money's going. I see big numbers.
So this is how school districts build budgets. If you go look on Greenville's website or any other larger school district and you look at their budget, they budget the same way that we do. They budget by fund, by function, and by object. And the reason we do that is because that's what our audit looks like. And that is a requirement by the State Department of Education. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you don't like the way, or you don't like the way that our district budgets, which is basically we're following this South Carolina state guidelines.
Well, and you bring up a good point. I don't like the way our audit team was handled over the last couple of years, in the sense that, they basically allowed for violation of procurement for 5 years. And we took a special audit that was not looking for that to find it. And this is the same problem that you run into over and over again when you look at what is logical, and then, you try to tell me, well, this is the way Greenville does it. This is what the state requires. Yet I'm going to be going back to my constituents here and ask them to raise up the millage rate at a higher rate, which affects us all, because it affects our cars. It affects our, it's not like we're not paying extra money when we raise this millage rate. I looked at my millage rate on my car taxes, and I was pretty shocked to see what this is going to change. It may not seem like a small amount, but it's affecting every citizen in this county. So we have to be very careful when we look at a budget and then we don't truly understand, where all this money's going, and these substantial raises that were given over the last couple of years. The teachers weren't getting these raises, but I guess other staff members were getting raises. And then I look at all these coaches and everything, people moving out of the classroom into these positions. Until we start doing an in-depth dive into these departments, I'm very, very concerned with giving almost, and I don't call it a blank checkbook, but it is increasing this. And I agree with Mr. Calhoun. This use of the funds, even though historically we haven't been using it, it's a little unnerving when I look at this and I can't understand it. And I keep raising, and I know it's the vendors that are driving me nuts. It's not knowing how much we're paying for all of these outside vendors to come in. And then what also drives me nuts is not truly understanding how many FTEs are being funded by ESSER. And that should be represented in this budget. And I know it's a special time. I mean, you can talk about past histories about how Greenville and the state developed these things, but that's before we came into this $168 million landfall of money, in which it's like, a drug. We've now become addicted to using it. And it's so much of a drug that we are actually taking money out of this year's budget, out of this year's millage, and pushing it forward to cover for anticipated expenses in 24, 25. And that is just a logical reading of what you're telling me now. I mean, I know you've done a really great job in trying to do this and comply, but I still, I have this, I agree with Mr. Calhoun, just one little thing, and suddenly we're so close and tight. And I know we've been talking about this for months. This isn't something new.
So, Mr. Grabowski, do you have a specific question you would like to ask or email or handle tomorrow at Audit and Finance, or?
We'll handle it at Audit and Finance. I don't want to belabor the point. And I just got a feeling this is just going to have to be something that we're going to have to deal with next year. But, I want to raise my concerns, because every time I read this budget, I find more questions than I find answers. And I know how hard Ms. Carlin's working. So it's not staff. This is on us. So
Mr. Grabowski,
we'll move on.
This is Anita Huggins here. If you could, I think we'd be incredibly grateful if you could put a list of your questions specifically in writing to us so that we can address them for you and answer them. I sense your frustration, and you're stating that you've asked for things numerous times that perhaps you've stated you haven't received. If you could put those questions in writing to us so that we, across departments, from Mr. Baroi's team and Mr. Brigman and from the academic division, that we answer those. We want to be sure that we're as transparent as possible. Specifically, for example, in regards to your questions about teacher coaches, for math support and assistant principals, I thought we had reviewed those those school data review recommendations and requests from principals. I thought we had reviewed those in open session. But again, if we haven't, we want to make sure that we are as transparent as possible. So if you could send those things over to us, we'd be incredibly grateful.
I appreciate it, Ms. Huggins. I appreciate it. And I will.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Because I have a couple more.
Sure.
All right, cool. So, and I think you answered this before for me before. With the charter schools and the meeting street schools or whatnot, I see they're getting a variance of about, I think meeting street about 18 million. A couple of the charter schools about 24, 25 million. When that's really related to the amount of students that are going into the schools and based off the head count.
Yes.
And
I can share with you the breakdown of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That, but then also, can you explain to me again the what's the difference between a Tiger team and a PM team?
Mr. Baroi.
Yes, sir. Tiger Team is a multidiscipline group of individuals: carpenter, plumber, electrician. They handle multiple different types of work in a school. They go out 4 times a year, 1 week at each school. a preventive maintenance team works on replacing filters and doing other preventive maintenance type things to prevent things from breaking.
Mhm. And what's the PM team?
That's the preventive maintenance team.
Oh, preventive maintenance.
Preventive maintenance team, replacing filters is an example of a PM team.
Okay, preventive maintenance. And then the Tiger team was,
Tiger team does repairs to schools. So they take the outstanding work orders from schools that can be handled by their team. And they also do an interview with the principal prior to the visit. Principal gathers information from their teachers. They work off shift as well. They work starting in the early afternoon into the evening. So they've got some overlap with schools, but then they continue to do work into the night when there are no students there.
okay. So the variance is more so paying for the increase of costs for their team as far as like the salaries or whatnot?
I'd have to look to see where that's at. Is that in the book in a particular
Mhm.
location?
Yeah, they're getting, they had a pretty, it wasn't really significant. It was probably about $1 million or so of variance from last year to this year. And it looked like it could just be from the, it looked like it could just be from, the cost of living increasing and whatnot.
Is
But,
it on a
Page
particular page,
number.
oh,
Mr.
yeah,
Collins?
let me get back to it because I just went away from it. Yep, 24. 0190, they got a variance of basically $2 million, 1.98 million. And the PM team has a variance of 0197 has a variance of 780,000.
So the Tiger team, are looking at page 24, Tiger team says 1.9 million.
Yeah, so the 1.988 million.
And that's a variance from the previous year.
Yeah, and I would actually have to go back to last year's budget. But,
And my expectation, it's labor escalation.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Salaries and
Labor,
benefits.
salaries.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes, sir.
All right, I think I'm for real this time.
You have more time tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. I left all my notes in.
Thank you. Anything else from any trustees? Okay. Is there a motion for us to convene into executive session?
So move.
Moved by Ms. Roberson. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Watley,
Yes, ma'am.
your voice. Okay.
Madam Chair, may I ask that we define for the public what it is that we're convening into executive session for?
Certainly. The entire title of the item is motion to convene executive session to consider items covered by attorney-client privilege.
Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
when I looked at the agenda, it was my understanding that it was for an exchange.
Foreign exchange student request.
That is correct.
Okay.
Those of you that are viewing online, if you will voice vote, if you will state your name and vote.
Carol Temple, yes.
Leah Watley, aye.
Mr. Grabowski, are you still with us?
Yes, Keith Grabowski, aye.
Thank you. And the motion passes. We'll be back very shortly. Open session to conduct the regular business of the meeting.
So moved.
It's moved by Mr. Calhoun. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Roberson. Those of you with voice vote, if you'll please state your name and your vote.
Leah Watley, aye.
Dr. Temple and Mr. Grabowski.
They may still be in the breakout room.
Well, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Has Mr. Kelly voted?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay, so do we have 5 ayes? Motion passes.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to grant the agency's request to allow this foreign exchange student to enroll into Wando High School for the entire 2023-2024 school year?
I so move.
Hold on one second, let them bring them out of the breakout room. They're still sitting inside the breakout room right now.
I'm now here.
Okay, there you go.
Did you get Keith? We were both stuck in the breakout room.
All right, I think we good now.
I move to grant the request.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Watley, seconded by Mr. Calhoun. So the motion as it reads on our screen is a little different. We are actually moving to allow. We have already considered the agency's request. That was an executive session, so the board moves to allow the foreign exchange student. Yes. Thank you. The voice votes.
Aye.
Keith Grabowski. Keith Grabowski, aye.
Carol Temple, aye.
Leah Watley, aye.
Thank you. And the motion passes. In the closing items, we have upcoming meetings on July the 17th, Committee of the Whole at 3 o'clock and a board meeting at 5:15. On August the 14th, a Committee of the Whole meeting. And then August the 28th, a board meeting.
Audit and finance tomorrow at 10.
Thank you. Audit and Finance meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Any other meetings? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Calhoun. Thank you. All in favor, stand.
Aye.